Kicking off at number 5, Epsilon 6, codename Village Idiots. No matter what secretive, highly specialized missions the Foundation's MTFs carry out across the planet, there are inevitably always going to be some unwitting public witnesses. It just comes with the territory, really. Whether it's an old alcoholic farmer out in his field that swears he just saw SCP-682 flying past the moon, or a young family driving down a freeway when suddenly SCP-096 bolts in front of their family 5-door saloon. The underappreciated Mobile Task Force Epsilon 6, codename Village Idiots, are the group that the Foundation calls in when things get a little bit messy out in suburbia. Inevitably, any containment breach in a highly populated area garners the need to keep a lid on things. As the record states, Epsilon 6 specialise in the investigation, containment and subsequent cleanup of anomalies in rural and suburban environments. One of their most widely successful documented cases was their work with SCP-2480, an extra-dimensional anomaly located around the ancient Bodfound Manor in a small coastal town in Massachusetts with a population of 9,000 residents. Epsilon 6 quickly descended on the town after Bodfound Manor became the site of a grisly incident involving a neo-Sarkic cult known as Adetum's Wake, infiltrating the community where they still remain to this day, just in case the fanatical flesh cult decides to show up again. Better safe than sorry, isn't it? Swinging in at number 4, Beta 7, codename Maz Hatters. Talking about cleanups, for those of you that are astute scholars of the SCP Foundation, you may have noticed that things often get incredibly messy, especially when you're dealing with horrifying, grotesque, anomalous entities that have a tendency of leaking their inorganic matter all over the place, or incurable prion diseases floating around in a picturesque woodland, which is never a good sign. Essentially, Beta 7 are the Foundation's version of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. As the record states, Mobile Task Force Beta 7, codename Maz Hatters, specialise in the acquisition and containment of anomalies exhibiting extreme biological, chemical or radiological hazards, as well as the rapid containment and cleanup of areas affected by these horrifying anomalies. Perhaps Beta 7's most infamous operation was with their containment of SCP-008, an incurable, 100% lethal prion disease that is transmitted through bodily fluids. One of its most grisly outbreaks was at Happy Acres Youth Camp, an outdoor wilderness experience in the mountainous regions of Wyoming. Wow, Beta 7 were the first people on site, but by the end of it, the entire camp was infected by 008. It's one hell of a read. We'll leave a link down below so you can take a look. Next up at number 3, Zeta 7, codename Mole Rats. Now, unfortunately for some, a lot of the wet work in the SCP Foundation involves many of its bravest operatives having to bite the bullet and poke their heads in places that no one else wants to poke. While as their codename suggests, Mobile Task Force Zeta 7 specialises in the investigation, exploration and containment of underground or enclosed areas that exhibit anomalous phenomena, particularly those with inconsistent topography or unstable space-time. Essentially, these are the guys that the Foundation calls in when a rift in space-time appears out of nowhere and they're like, hey, you better jump on in, guys. It's your job. Now, it's a thankless job also, but someone's got to do it. And as it comes with the territory, Mobile Task Force Zeta 7 has some of the highest number of operatives that are registered as missing in action, or much more tragically, just straight up swallowed whole by an anomalous entity, tentacles and all. It's not only space-time anomalies that they're willing to plunge down into though. Pretty much anything lurking beneath the ocean is at the responsibility of mole rats, and one of their most terrifying operations involved SCP-455, an infinite shipwreck that has never been fully explored, and Zeta 7 have already lost more operatives than they'd like to admit. Yeah, it's a bit of a tough job. Coming in at number 2, Epsilon 11, codename Nine-Tailed Fox. And yeah, you were just waiting for these guys, weren't you? For fans of the SCP Containment Breach video game, the phrase Mobile Task Force Unit Epsilon 11, designated Nine-Tailed Fox, has entered the facility will have a certain sense of resonance, to say the least, and heralds a moment where you know things are about to get really bad. Nine-Tailed Fox are the guys that the O5 Council call in when anomalous excrement hits the proverbial fan, and they're perhaps one of the most competent MTFs in the entire canon of the SCP Foundation. As the record states, Epsilon 11 handles internal security for the Foundation under oversight by Mobile Task Force Alpha 1. They are a special ops force deployed to Foundation sites when standard protocols fail and multiple breaches are imminent, and because of that, pretty much all of their operations are classified. Essentially, whenever a Foundation site falls into utter anomalous chaos during a containment breach, they send in Nine-Tailed Fox to make sure nothing gets out, and while they may be unequivocally the most badass operative force that the Foundation has has in their arsenal, they're also completely horrifying because they'll go to any lengths to make sure their mission is a success. They're comprised of 9 veteran squad members that are unrivaled in their respective fields, and these guys don't even flinch when staring down entities such as SCP-682 and SCP-173 because they're capable enough to know in that respect, if they blink, they're done for. The term XK class extinction event is terrifying enough in the SCP Foundation, but the phrase uttered afterwards musters an equal level of fear. Nine-tailed Fox has entered the facility. And finally, at number 1 spot, Alpha 1, codename Red Right Hand. Because there is one operative task force that Epsilon 11 answers to, and it's these guys, Mobile Task Force Alpha 1, codename Red Right Hand. It's interesting to know that at one point in time Alpha 1 were the Foundation's way of acting outside of the realms of ethical operations, and they were created by the O5 Council as a means to enact their will without tarnishing the Foundation's already questionable reputation. However, in 1948, Alpha 1's most competent and trusted operatives committed an unprecedented act of betrayal against the Foundation, splintering off and forming the now infamous Chaos Insurgency. Despite that though, the O5 Council had enough foresight to keep their most capable mobile task force in operation because only the Foundation's best are ordered to keep tabs on the most terrifying anomalous entities in their containment. Because of the nature of that though, it comes with a territory that pretty much nothing is known about them. As the record states, Mobile Task Force Alpha 1 are a group of highly specialised operatives that report directly to the O5 Council and are used in situations that require the strictest operational security. The task force consists of the Foundation's best and most loyal operatives, and any further information regarding Alpha 1 is classified level 5. So, in that case, I suppose you better get ready for a heavy dose of amnestics. Wait a minute, what was I saying again? Kicking off at number 5, Alpha 9, codename Last Hope. And with this initial entry, we're kind of getting 2 mobile task forces for the price of 1, because as we all know, you can't reference Alpha 9 without paying your dues to the mobile task force that came before them, Omega 7, aka Pandora's Box, a unit that was completely wiped out by the very SCP that formed the basis of it, Able, aka SCP-076, an immortal humanoid that can survive the power of a nuclear bomb and just so happens to be really good at killing things. The Foundation decided to form a mobile task force around his capabilities and soon brought in SCP-105 to augment their capabilities. While as is the same with many disasters in the SCP Foundation, things went really bad. Able essentially went rogue and killed pretty much everyone involved. Omega 7 was disbanded, decommissioned and struck from all records. But then enter Mobile Task Force Alpha 9, aka Last Hope, a recent attempt at a second chance of blending anomalies with the infrastructure of the Foundation. As the record states, Alpha 9 is the reborn Omega 7, a mobile task force explicitly intended to train and utilize humanoid SCP objects in the field built around the surviving SCP-105 and headed by Dr. Light. As far as operations go, it seems that so far so good, and Last Hope have acted exactly how the Foundation intended, to exploit and harness the all-powerful abilities of anomalous objects and humanoids to their advantage. Surely it can't go wrong a second time, right? Coming in next at number 4, Pi 1, codename City Slickers. And in our previous list we gave a direct nod to Mobile Task Force Epsilon 6, aka Village Idiots, a hands-on cleanup crew that deals with the consequences of any anomalous events out in the rural parts of the planet, but when things involve the big city lights of planet Earth, they call him Mobile Task Force Pi 1, aka City Slickers, and yeah, in actual fact they're pretty much as cool as they sound. Also, Pi 1 are perhaps one of the few task forces that have been involved in the most amount of anomalous events, and their track record is something to be admired by the powers that be in the Foundation. As the record states, Mobile Task Force Pi 1 specialise in the investigation, containment and subsequent cleanup of anomalies in densely populated urban environments, particularly in the New York metropolitan area where the vast majority of their wet work occurs. These guys are essentially stone cold chain smoking detectives that thrive in the underbelly of big city life. If a black market anomalous deal is about to go down between a group of interest, City Slickers will already be posing as a double agent. They were also heavily involved in the containment of SCP-688, aka the Memetic Killer Chef's Knife, and tragically they lost a boatload of agents in the process, so ooh. Next up at number 3, Omega 144, codename Unknown. And this entry is an incredibly interesting one, as it's a mobile task force made up for the sole purpose of containing the potential XK class extinction event of SCP-1844, a giant fiery pit that potentially serves as a gateway to a corporeal dimension of hellfire that will spell the end of all life on Earth. Essentially, it's hell. And so who do the Foundation get in to combat that hell? Priests, of course, priests from literally every religion on the planet. Yeah, but you didn't see that one coming, did you? Omega 144 is literally the holiest group of people in the Foundation, an interfaith task force that's sole purpose is to contain the Abrahamic apocalypse. Their containment of SCP-1844 is fairly straightforward, and they achieve this by constantly conducting various religious rituals, with no less than 3 members of the task force performing their specific procedures at the same time. Currently, the task force consists of a Benedictine monk, a Mormon prophet president, a Druze sheikh, a Carmelite nun, a Shabbat rabbi, the queen of the Bobo Ashanti mansion, a Sufi imam, a Mevlevi dervish, a Samaritan high priest. Yeah, they're covering a lot of bases, and in doing so, their combined sheer force of piety is literally holding back the apocalypse. That's teamwork, I guess. Swinging in next at number 2, Nu 7, codename Hammer Down. And a lot of you guys were calling for Hammer Down to appear on this list, and rightly so, because back in the day, when a containment breach got far too outrageously dangerous to handle, the Foundation would call in Mobile Task Force Nu 7, codename Hammer Down, and it indicated that they wanted to kill some anomalous entity really badly. As the record states, our Mobile Task Force Nu 7 is a battalion strength force consisting of 3 company-sized elements of Special Operations Infantry Forces, a light armoured vehicle company, tank platoon, a helicopter squadron, a CBRN platoon, combat engineers, nuclear weapons specialists, plus a multitude of support personnel. Essentially, it's the closest the Foundation will ever get to having an army of their own. The task force is based primarily out of armed biocontainment area 14 and is tasked with the responsibility of responding to incidents that involve a loss of communication with major Foundation facilities under circumstances where a containment breach, enemy compromise, or any other catastrophic event is suspected. They're the big guns, and they're the signal in a multitude of SCP articles that just got real, and or is about to hit the fan, or is hitting the fan, or the fan is now on fire and melting through reality. These guys have been tasked with hunting down packs of SCP-939 and containing the sites of more world-ending anomalous viruses like SCP-610 than anyone would ever want to put on their resume. They also work closely with the Horizon Initiative and the Church of the Broken God, and they're suspected to play a large part in the coming War of the Flesh. Wait, not sure if I was meant to say that. And finally, coming in at number 1, Tau 5, codename Samsara. And more so than with Hammer Down, you guys fervently called for Samsara to make an appearance on this list, and of course, rightly so, I was saving it, because as our commentator Indra Server so aptly put, these guys are essentially the Foundation's version of the Power Rangers, and what's cooler than immortal cyborg soldiers made from the cloned corpse of a dead god? Yeah, you had me at immortal cyborg soldiers. As the record states, Mobile Task Force Tau 5, aka Samsara, are immortal cyborg clones created from the flesh of a dead god recovered by the Foundation in 1988. Tau 5 utilizes esoteric and experimental Foundation weaponry to investigate and contain thaumaturgic, magical, and psionic threats. Are you impressed yet? It's also important to note that Samsara play a massive role in the third lore canon, which is a Foundation storyline that specifically focuses on the implication of bioorganic entities. It is very possible that the dead god that Samsara are created from is that of McCain, the overarching figure in the Church of the Broken God, which would also be absolutely awesome. As some have criticised though, Tau 5 are incredibly overpowered when compared to the other mobile task forces in the Foundation. They can upload their consciences to machines, infinitely immortal in technology, and then be re-uploaded to another more powerful cyborg body. They're extraordinarily skilled, intelligent to superhuman levels, have anomalously augmented physical capabilities, and also they have flamethrowers for hands if they so desire. That's just Mobile Task Force Tau 5 though, they're the best in the business for a reason. But Samsara also covers some incredibly interesting mimetic anomalies, and their part in the Bart Hughes storyline is one that should definitely be discovered by any SCP Foundation fan. Why don't you take a look? Kicking off at number 5, the Serpent's Hand. Now there might be a lot to get your head around in the wider world of the SCP Foundation, but perhaps the easiest ease into this concept is with the counter group of activists known as the Serpent's Hand, whose primary intention is to bring down the Foundation's containment and let loose all of its horrifying anomalous entities to the world. They believe that humanity and all other peoples of the known world, so we're talking multiple dimensions, don't deserve to be kept in darkness and ignorance in regard to the nature of anomalous anomalous entities. And although it may not seem it at first, to be honest, they make a pretty convincing argument. The Serpent's Hand claims that the Foundation, which they refer to as the Jailers, cannot keep imprisoning these horrifying entities forever, save that the whole world ends up in a containment cell. They claim that the Foundation cannot hold the future back indefinitely, and that inevitably the lock will break and an extinction level event will be left up to a coin toss. Not only that though, but the Serpent's Hand seems to have some kind of ancient anomalous technology that they inherited known as the Wanderer's Library, a kind of mystical connection of portals that lets the Hand slip through dimensions and corporeal planes to sabotage the Foundation. Kind of poses the question, are they the good guys? Next up at number 4, the Chaos Insurgency. And if we're asking who the good guys are, well, it's definitely not this particular group of murderous insurgents. As the record states, in 1924 the SCP Foundation formed a covert special task force known only to the mysterious O5 Council, codenamed Insurgency. They were formed by the most capable members of the elite mobile task force known as the Red Right Hand, who were famed for their loyalty to the Council and notorious for their inscrutable secrecy of their identities and operations. In an act of self-subterfuge though, the Foundation claimed to the wider anomalous world that this group turned rogue and went AWOL, along with some of their most valuable researchers and anomalous objects. In actual fact though, the O5 fabricated this story so that the Insurgency could complete missions with ethically questionable methods and politically unsavory results, whilst keeping the Foundation's reputation as clean as it could be. This Insurgency operated for over 20 years, answering only in secret to the O5 Council, completing some of the most heinous operations, all with the ultimate goal to further the will of the Foundation. Well, turns out you should be careful what you wish for, because in 1948 the O5 Council's biggest lie became a reality and the Insurgency actually did go rogue during a seemingly routine operation. The Foundation was stunned until to this day the Chaos Insurgency operates in a shrouded mystery, often appearing out of the shadows to sabotage the Foundation's inner goings on. Who knows what the hell they want? Well, either that or it's another double bluff. Secret organizations, man. You can't ever trust them. Next up at number 3, Herman Fuller's Circus of the Disquieting. If you've ever seen American Horror Story or read any of the wider works of Stephen King, you'll know that a common trope in turn of the century history was that of the Curiosity Show, otherwise known as a freak show. Well, turns out the Foundation's universe has its own version, and this one is comprised of a whole host of anomalous entities. Although the circus has never actually been observed by the Foundation, they have in fact successfully recovered many of its anomalous performers, who often tell the horrifying tale of the horrors inflicted upon them by the iron-fisted ringmaster Herman Fuller. Some of the instances described at the hands of Herman Fuller are horrifying to say the least, but the majority of them were at the hands of the sociopathic Richard C. Normus, a man hired by Fuller to be his taskmaster, who forced the anomalous entities to breed, treated them like cattle, and mercilessly killed any that displeased him. This went on for years and years, all in the means of Fuller's twisted entertainment. But fear not, because there is a resolute ending to the tale of Herman Fuller's Circus of the Disquieting that is definitely worth the read. Well, maybe, anyway. As with many things in the SCP Foundation, all is not as it may seem. Or is it? I guess that's the point. Yeah. Coming in at number 2, Marshall, Carter and Dark, which, whilst being one of the most inherently evil organizations in the entire SCP Foundation multiverse, they're also, of course, one of the most polite. As the record states, Marshall, Carter and Dark are an anomaly-dealing merchant corporation based out of London, England, who are infamous for acquiring anomalous items and reselling them to their willing club members at secret ritualistic auctions. Essentially, they are the aristocracy of the anomalous world, who have profited from the exploitation of all-powerful entities for hundreds of years, and now they just kind of see the world as their plaything. Despite that though, they've managed to keep a respectful relationship with just about every other powerful organization in the anomalous world. But the thing is, if you cross these guys, then yeah, you're pretty much done for. They're like the East India Trading Company, just with world-ending alien technology and a fetish for cosmic horror. Their structure of power is something to be reckoned with as well. Both Marshall and Carter are some of the most feared figures in both the corporation and the wider anomalous world, but even they fear the mysterious character known only as Dark, an individual that is only ever heard from through his immaculately penned letters, passing his nefarious will down through the chain of command. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, Neo-Sarcasm. I'm not going to lie, this one is absolutely huge in its scale, as in an entire Foundation's worth of archives could probably be amassed on Sarcasm alone. To cut a long story short though, there are two opposing forces in the Foundation's multiverse. The Church of the Broken God, also known as the Mechanites, an ancient religion that worships technology and sees flesh as broken, and their counterpart, Sarcasm, an equally ancient religion that thinks the exact opposite. Sarkic cults worship flesh and believe in the apotheosis of humanity and the biological form. Now, in an even more contrived fashion, there are two factions of Sarcasm. Proto-Sarcasm, which, if I'm being honest, they're pretty awesome, if not wholly interesting, and the much more nefarious Neo-Sarcasm, who kind of make Marshall, Carter and Dark look like Looney Tunes, although they're probably related. Ancient cults have a habit of sticking together. Neo-Sarkites are essentially what the New World Order would be if they were fanatical zealots of an eldritch cosmic horror that consumed its followers into a mass of writhing organic matter. They exist in the upper echelons of society, ancient and incredibly wealthy families that span generations upon generations, inbreeding to keep their black bloodline pure. Their ultimate goal is to bring about the war of the flesh once again, ultimately destroying their enemies, the Church of the Broken God, and mushing together the entire population of existence into a big ball of bioorganic matter. Nasty. But the opposition wants to turn us all into cyborgs, so I don't really know what to believe anymore.